Let's get into the news and views to see how far we get. Sleep medications. Oh dear. Including Ambien have kind of become infamous for prompting people to act bizarrely in a semi-sleeping stupor. Except now the US Food and Drug Administration, that's a misnomer in and of itself, have decided in their wisdom that they will require sleeping pill manufacturers to post warnings on labels. Now, there's been some fairly harrowing incidents related to sleeping pills that have included accidental overdoses, falls, burns, near drownings, exposure to extreme cold temperatures leading to a loss of limbs, carbon monoxide poisoning, drowning, hypothermia, motor vehicle collisions, and self-injuries such as gunshot wounds and apparent suicide attempts, according to the FDA research. And they were stating patients don't usually remember any of these events. In other words, the FDA is done pulling punches about sleeping meds and announced Tuesday that a prominent warning would be required on all medication guides for Ambien, Lunesta, Sonata, and the generic version of Ambien, which is called Zolpidem. What happened to counting sheep? Yeah, they all used to count sheep. You know, why do we need pills to go to sleep? You know, I know some people can be in pain and whatnot, but you can always, if you're in tune with yourself, which is important, you can always overcome those hurdles. Now, the government agency first issued a public warning against bizarre sleeping behaviour over 12 years ago. Quite why it's taken this long then, meaning that this week's new warning merely ups the ante. And the University of Pennsylvania physician Eileen Rosen said, "This is something I've been telling my patients for the last 15 years, and in the sleep community this is well known. And these drugs have some risk. All drugs have risk. All of them are poisons to our system, and I mean all of them." President Trump said that the US will boost its purchases of domestic farm products for humanitarian aid in an effort to offset lost demand from China as trade tensions flare between the two nations. It's more to do with the dragons than Trump and Z. Trump said on Twitter on Friday that the US will use its money from the tariffs to buy American agricultural products in larger amounts than China ever did. I wonder if he's referring to the trust. And send it to poor and starving countries for humanitarian aid. Now, the president indicated potential purchases of $15 billion from farmers, and soybean and grain futures held mostly steady after the announcements, whilst industry groups opposed Trump's additional US tariffs on China. Seems Pindar man's not too happy, or former Pindar man anyway. Barack Obama with Hillary Clinton and her failed soulless campaign, according to his book, back in 2016. And he said he took her loss as a personal insult. Oops. They're all throwing each other under a bus. Now, the new edition, The Call of History, or His Story, which includes Obama's reaction to the 2016 election, said Obama compared himself to Michael Corleone, the character of The Godfather, and Obama thought he almost got out of office untouched, like a mob boss avoiding a hit job. But he found himself shocked by the election results, thinking before November 8th there was no way Americans would turn on him and his legacy, and he felt it was in safe hands. Now, the book details also reveals that Obama could not believe Americans had decided to replace him with a buffoonish showman whose calling cards had been repeated bankruptcies, serial marriages, and racist dog whistles. Oops. It seems the Muslim Brotherhood man of Langley 3 and failed Pindar's not too happy. Oh well. Nothing like a good measles outbreak to boost sales, particularly when you have a monopoly on the only measles vaccine available. Oh my. And the corporate funded mainstream media does almost all of your marketing for free by singing the praises of the vaccine while never mentioning the potential side effects or criminal cases currently in place over corruption surrounding the development of the vaccine. Now, given the fact that the US law prevents anyone from suing Merck, the company, if a vaccine injury or death occurs from their vaccines. Who made that law? And that the US government, via the CDC, is the largest purchaser of vaccines to the tune of $5 billion per year. Now, the vaccine industry has become perhaps the most lucrative market in the history of the world. Merck and Company Inc. reported higher than expected first quarter profits for 2019, and sales of the MMR measles vaccine soared 27% to $496 million. Company also saw strong sales growth overseas for its Gardasil vaccine. That's the one that wrecks young girls, as sales for that rose 27% as well to $828 million, beating analyst expectations by around $25 million. Now, a similar increase in sales of the MMR vaccine happened in 2015 when the corporate media announced a measles crisis based out of Disneyland. Really. Film stars Juliette Binoche and Emmanuel Bert joined hundreds of people from the arts world in backing France's Yellow Vest movement last Saturday as the latest anti-government marches got underway. Binoche and Bert joined 1,400 signatories to an open letter published in the left-leaning Daily Liberation paper. Entitled Yellow Vests, We Are Not Fooled, it denounced what it said were attempts to discredit the movement and backed the demands of the protesters. Now, these calls included for greater social and fiscal justice and radical measures to tackle what they called an ecological emergency. Now, the open letter also condemned what it said were the increasingly repressive measures taken against the movement, noting that international organisations such as the UN and the European Union had already expressed their concern. Personally, I would be wary of so-called famous people joining in. It's nice in some ways. Some people think that you've got to be famous to be validated for a story or a narrative. Quite wise beyond me. It's a bit like Tom DeLonge in the E.T. movement. Quite often it's a sideways distraction move, but if they're genuine, it's good to hear. Democrats in the US House of Representatives are about to vote on whether to hold Attorney General William Barr in contempt of Congress. And the Judiciary Committee took action after Mr. Barr refused to submit an unredacted version of the special counsel's Robert Mueller's report. Now, Mr. Trump hit back by a certain executive privilege over the report, shielding it from public view. And the White House and Congress accused each other of abusing power, and Democratic lawmakers took action after Mr. Barr did not comply with the legal order to release the Mueller report minus the redactions. Now, the 448-page Mueller report was released last month with parts blacked out, including information that is classified or linked to pending investigations. Funny, sometimes national security works both ways. The Democrats seem to have forgotten that. The special counsel did not conclude there was a criminal conspiracy between Moscow and the Trump campaign to influence the 2016 election. And this is just more theatre. That's all it is. He said, she said, you give me this and pass this back, and it's just going backwards and forwards. You know, it's more theatre. And that will continue until the people hold these paid actors accountable. Like, what are you doing to fix the country and create real jobs? That applies to them all. Not this visa document and this report and that report. You know, there's people running around in this country that shouldn't have been running around at all. It's just becoming tiresome, in my opinion. More than 40 US states have filed a lawsuit accusing pharmaceutical firms of conspiring to artificially inflate the cost of common medicinal drugs. Good move. Now, the lawsuit alleges that as many as 20 companies have been involved in price fixing for over 100 drugs, including treatments for diabetes and also cancer. Now, one of the firms accused is Teva Pharmaceuticals, who are the world's largest producer of generic medicine. Now, Teva predictably has denied any wrongdoing and says it will defend its actions. Now, the legal action, which follows a 5-year investigation, accuses drug companies of involvement in a scheme to boost prices, and in some cases by more than 1,000%, and was filed on Friday by Connecticut's Attorney General William Tong. And he said, we have hard evidence that shows the generic drug industry perpetuated a multi-billion-dollar fraud on the American people. And he said, we have emails, text messages, telephone records and former company insiders that we will believe will provide a multi-year conspiracy to fix prices and divide the market share for huge numbers of generic drugs. Now, a representative of Teva in the US said that the Israeli company has not engaged in any conduct that would lead to civil or criminal liability. Teva are an Israeli company. I keep repeating it. It comes up far too often, does it not? Now, the other 19 firms implicated in the lawsuit have yet to comment, and 15 individuals were also named as defendants accused of overseeing the price-fixing scheme on a day-to-day basis. Prime Minister Theresa May, or may not, in the UK could set a date for her resignation in the coming days, and the chairman of the Conservative backbench 1922 committee said that the PM will step down when her Brexit deal is ratified by Parliament. But some MPs are arguing they want a fixed date. Sir Graham Brady said he expected a clear understanding of that timetable once she has met the committee, and she was going to do so this week. He also expected Brexit talks with Labour to peter out within the next coming days, and he also refused, that's Sir Graham Brady, to rule himself out of running for a replacement for Mrs May. The British people will then find out that replacing her is not the answer, no matter who they replace her with. These people are not running governments. They're told to run by the script. Acting US Defence Secretary Patrick Shanahan has approved the transfer of $1.5 billion to build more than 80 miles of barriers on the border with Mexico. He's moving quick, is he not? For those of you who remember the intel from last week. Now, this includes taking about $600 million from an account meant for Afghan security forces. But they can give $600 million to Afghan security forces, but he can't give it to the people or the veterans. Now, the latest move was predictably opposed by congressional Democrats, who also criticised a March transfer of $1 billion in military money to fund Republican President Donald Trump's wall. Now, these funds were withdrawn from a variety of sources, including cost savings, programme changes and revised requirements, and therefore will have a minimal impact on force readiness, Mr Shanahan said in a statement. And he also said that the US military had more than 4,000 service members now on the Mexican border, along with 19 craft. 5 banks this week, no surprise, some of the names have been fined just over $1 billion, 1 billion euros, I should say, which is around $1.2 billion by the European Commission after traders clubbed together to rig the foreign exchange market. So we have exposures of rigging the vaccine market and sleeping drugs and generic drugs, and now rigging the markets. It seems the net is closing on these criminals more each week. Now, 4 banks in what was known as the Banana Split cartel, Barclays, Royal Bank of Scotland, Citigroup and JP Morgan, were fined a total of €811 million in all, and 3 banks in the Essex Express cartel, Barclays and Royal Bank of Scotland again, plus MUFG, were fined €258 million. Now, a 6th bank, UBS, was excused financial penalties for revealing the cartel's existence. They're all throwing each other under the bus. And the European Commission said the market rigging took place from 2007 to 2013. And what about to modern day? And the Commission's investigation, which began in 2013, revealed that some individual foreign exchange traders using online chat rooms exchanged trading plans and occasionally coordinated their trading strategies. Another exposure, this time Bayer, Rothschilds, Monsanto, and a Californian jury on Monday awarded more than $2 billion to a couple who claimed Bayer's AG Roundup weed killer caused their cancer. And it's the largest US jury verdict to date against the company in litigation over that particular chemical. Now, the large punitive damages award is likely to be reduced due to US Supreme Court rulings that limit the ratio of punitive to compensatory damages at a ratio of 9-1. The jury awarded a total of $2 billion in punitive damages and also $55 million in compensatory damages. And this was the 3rd consecutive US jury verdict against the company in litigation over the chemical, which Bayer acquired as part of its $63 billion purchase of Monsanto last year. Last news piece, and then we're going to have some Q&A quick. The US military began to move gunships into the region last week, into Iran, or around there anyway. And one wonders, is it a coincidence to start off a larger event? Now, the United Arab Emirates has as many as 4 ships anchored in the Persian Gulf were damaged this week in what Gulf officials described Monday as a sabotage attack off the coast of the United Arab Emirates. Now, details of the incident remain unclear, and it raised risks for shippers in a region vital to global energy supplies at a time of increasing tensions between the US and Iran over its unravelling nuclear deal with world powers. The US issued a warning this week to sailors as the United Arab Emirates regional allies condemned Sunday's alleged attack, which the UAE said targeted vessels off the coast of its port city in Fujairah, and Gulf officials declined to say who they suspected was responsible. It obviously wasn't those honest terrorists again, which generally means it's a country with 6 letters in. When that happens, what we'll see. But a US official in Washington said an American military team's initial assessment indicated it was Iran or Iranian allies used explosives to blow holes in the ship, including 2 Saudi oil tankers and a Norwegian flagged vessel. Yeah, right. Okay, that's the news and views around the world.